And joining me now is James Hohmann, a reporter for the Washington Post, as we continue the conversation. James, Secretary Tillerson's meetings in Russia, what does the United States need to take away from this first visit by a Trump official to Moscow?
Yeah, Dana, good to be with you. And we're hearing that the meeting is sort of wrapped up. We'll have this press conference soon. It was about an hour and 50-minute discussion between Rex Tillerson and Vladimir Putin. And one of the things that was surprising to American officials is that Vladimir Putin was actually on time. He's sort of notorious for making people wait a long time to meet with him. He's kept people guessing, including in our State Department, about whether or not Tillerson would get FaceTime with him, despite what we've heard from the last few guests about their past relationship. But Putin was punctual and spent nearly 2 hours talking with Secretary Tillerson. So in terms of what the takeaway is, they're not going to come out with some kind of agreement or something to shake hands. But Rex Tillerson, who did receive the Order of Friendship within the last 5 years from Putin, has been taking a very tough tack in recent days. He was just at the G7 summit and spoke pretty critically of Russia. He, at one point in the last few days, said they're either incompetent or basically evil or complicit in the chemical weapons use. So Tillerson, I think, is trying to establish a new rapport with Putin, and if he comes away with the Russians thinking that America is now going to be tougher and won't be pushed around, I think that the State Department will consider that a success.
Well, certainly just in how it looks, it is a good thing that Vladimir Putin at this point has met with him despite all of the rhetoric.
It is, and you're so right. You mentioned a couple minutes ago, Dana, how far we've come in just 2 weeks, right? I mean, not that long ago, we were talking about, 2 weeks ago, if Rex Tillerson, pre the Syria strikes, if Rex Tillerson had gone and had a bilateral 2-hour meeting with Putin, the whole conversation would be very different. It would be, why is the administration cozying up to this autocratic dictator so much? Now it is in a different sort of frame. We clearly upset the Russians with the strikes last week, and now the question is, how does the relationship change? Are there still areas where the U.S. and Russia can constructively work together, perhaps battling ISIS? Or are we meant to be sort of two great powers at loggerheads?
President Trump is holding a joint news conference this afternoon with the NATO Secretary General. What should we be expecting to come of that?
Well, it's Donald Trump, so you never know what to expect.
True.
But there's obviously a lot of, which makes our jobs fun. There's obviously a lot of history there. Donald Trump here in our newsroom a year ago basically said he was going to withdraw from NATO, or he didn't quite say that, but he said he didn't see a purpose for it. He thought it was irrelevant, that it had outlived its usefulness. He didn't think that the U.S. should put any money toward it. And he has stocked his cabinet, I think, kind of under the radar in some ways, with a lot of people who are very committed to the NATO alliance. And Trump has walked back some of his past criticism. I think today you are going to see him try to reassure the NATO leader somewhat, to project a united front, especially because of the Syria strikes last week. And at the same time, Trump may throw in a jab where he says, other countries in NATO need to put up more money toward defense spending. We saw him do that during his meeting with Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, at the White House a couple weeks ago.
Right now, the Washington Post, it started this morning reporting some new information in regards to Russia and the Trump campaign, that the FBI obtained a warrant to monitor President Trump's advisor, Carter Page. Can you give us some of the details on that?
Yeah, so a FISA warrant is very hard to get. You have to, Jim Comey, the FBI director, said you have to have paperwork that's thicker than your wrist to get one of those warrants. The judges take it very seriously, and in order to get a FISA warrant approved during a general election presidential campaign against a senior, not a senior advisor, but an advisor to the Trump campaign, would have required a lot of probable cause. It would have required that a level of confidence that he wasn't just sort of unwittingly being played by the Russians, but that he was in contact with the Russians. There's some evidence that has emerged that he had been in communications with Russians and people tied to Russian intelligence over the last few years. The Trump folks distancing themselves from this guy, trying to say, he really wasn't doing this in consultation with us, but it's the furthest we know yet of just how far the FBI investigation went. And we also were learning this was happening the FISA warrant has been extended. It only lasts 90 days, and we know a judge agreed to extend it, which means that they were getting something worth extending it for.
Right.
And it also came relatively early last summer, which is also notable because Russia wasn't really on our radar last summer. We now know subsequently that the FBI was investigating this much earlier than we knew before.
And James, do you have any sense that this was what President Trump was referring to when he talked about wiretapping earlier when we heard that accusation?
We don't know. The White House won't say that. It is a funny dynamic because for the last 3 weeks, Sean Spicer at his briefings has said Carter Page had nothing to do with us. He really wasn't an advisor, even though he was. And then you have some people in Trump's orbit, not necessarily directly from the White House, now saying the fact that there was this FISA warrant on Carter Page proves that there was wiretapping against Trump. And you really can't have that both ways. Those are different messages. I don't think this is what Trump was referring to when he originally made that accusation 6 weeks ago now. But I think this is one of those things where perhaps he'll use that to claim some sort of vindication.
James Hohmann with the Washington Post. James, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dana.